Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Giants Roundtable Podcast. I am Matthew Schmidt. He is Dylan Feltovich. And it's funny, we were going to actually record this podcast yesterday. And it was like, Dylan, I called you in the morning and you had stuff going on. You couldn't do it yesterday. And maybe like a half hour after we talked, maybe an hour, I forget what it was, some news broke that we were kind of thankful. Like, it's a good thing we didn't do it yesterday. It's better today. We have this news to talk about. Dexter Lawrence has requested a trade from the Giants. He's upset over his contract situation, has no more money guaranteed coming to him at this point now, the last 2 years of his deal. Dylan, do you have any immediate thoughts on the Dexter Lawrence trade request?
Yeah, I mean, I was taken aback by it because I totally didn't see that one coming. And I mean, lucky for us, we were able to make sure that the podcast was today to be able to talk about it and stuff. But that was definitely shocking to say the least. I'm not 100% sure of the reasoning why, because that's the thing. A lot of these scenarios, when it comes down to it, it's either something that could be money or anything else. There's a driving factor to this type of stuff.
Yeah.
And I know for, as a Browns fan myself, feels like we deal with this on a constant basis, especially with Myles Garrett and stuff.
Yeah, right. You're hearing it again now.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there's a part of me that wants to say that it's probably a money thing because you mentioned it too, the guaranteed money and stuff that plays a factor into it. However, I do think that it is a little bit interesting to look at it from the lens of, maybe he wants to be competing for a playoff contending team and stuff. And I think back to, the Myles Garrett situation at this time last year. It's a similar thing, but once they ended up giving him, an extension and got all this money, everything seemed fine. And Myles Garrett ended up breaking the sack record this year. And I'm a little bit, I'm waiting to see how it all kind of pans out, but I'm very fascinated to see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of multiple factors here. I do think that the guaranteed money is a big thing because, especially after the year Dexter Lawrence just had, where he had a half a sack and 8 quarterback hits, it wasn't a good year for him. I still maintain that he was battling through an injury throughout the year. I think that's the reason to explain his lack of production. But the way he sees it, what if he gets injured in training camp or even during the season, and then the Giants can just say, okay, no more guaranteed money, we're cutting him, right? So I think that's part of it. Another reason, like you said, is the contending team factor. And I think Dexter Lawrence seeing Leonard Williams go to Seattle and win a Super Bowl, remember he was with the Giants for a couple of years there, and him and Lawrence are pretty close. Julian Love also was in Seattle this year, former Giant. Saquon Barkley won a Super Bowl in Philadelphia. Daniel Jones this year, he got hurt, but Daniel Jones was playing really well in Indianapolis, and him and Dexter Lawrence were really close. And it sounds like a kind of an odd friendship because one's a defensive tackle, one's a quarterback, but they were really close in the Giants. So he may be seeing, all these players leave and experience success elsewhere. I think, maybe if I go somewhere else, I'll be able to experience more success. But what I will say, though, is it's kind of an odd time for it to happen because you just got John Harbaugh now. Things are finally trending in the right direction. And even this past year, they won 4 games. But, Dylan, we talked about it all year long. They were very competitive throughout the year. Right, even against those good teams, they actually stayed in those games and were very, very competitive. So one thing I'll add here too, Dylan, and this is kind of like not just for Dexter for Lawrence, this is for players in general who sign contracts in the NFL. The NFL is not like the NBA or the MLB where, basically all the contracts are guaranteed, right? In the NBA, you can't be like, okay, we're going to sign you to a 4-year, $90 million deal, which is what Lawrence got from the Giants in 2023. Okay, but the last 2 years, you're not guaranteed any money. We just cut you loose. The NFL is different that way. And I'm actually shocked the Players Association has allowed this to happen for so long. But it is what it is. You signed that contract. When you signed on the dotted line, when he signed on the dotted line in May of 2023, he knew very well at the time he was not getting guaranteed money the last 2 years of his deal. He could have made sure the Giants structured his deal in a way where he gets some guaranteed money. He didn't do that. It's a contract. You signed it. And the Giants, because of that contract, are within their right, as messed up as it sounds, they're within their right to cut him loose over those final 2 years if they feel he isn't living up to his production. And what we saw this past year, when he had the worst year of his career, this is why NFL teams do this because, hey, if they can get away with it, they'll do it. So the Giants actually don't have to do anything here, Dylan. Like, really, if you think about it, he's under contract. So let's say the Giants don't trade him and they don't give him an extension, right? Or they don't restructure his deal at all. What's he going to do? He's not going to sit out a full year. Yeah, he can hold out a training camp, all that. He can do that. But if he sits out, I wrote an article about this yesterday, and even also I touched on this morning an article as well. If he sits out, it's basically career suicide, especially after the year he just had. He can't do that. I think fans and media and in general are under the impression that Dexter Lawrence and players in general have more leverage than they actually have.
Yeah, and I truly think that in this case, it's the Giants that have the ball in their court at this point because, like you said, you could sit out, but I do think if you look at kind of the track record of guys who end up sitting out and missing time and stuff, they aren't as productive.
Dylan, I want to interrupt you real quick. I was just on that point. Hassan Reddick, 2 years ago, missed the first half, not even the full season. He missed 6-7 games for the Jets. Look what happened. His career basically done now.
Yeah, and it's a common thing on not just on defense, but it's also on offense. We see Deshaun Watson, Le'Veon Bell, all of these different guys go out there, and when they sit out, they don't come back the same. And I look at Dexter Lawrence's age at 28, and I'm a little bit concerned about that. Now, I do think that at the time when he probably signed that contract, you're most likely banking on having that good 2025 season. So then when it does come into extension talks and stuff like that, you're able to say like, hey, like this is what happened. I played well and stuff. I deserve it. And I think you're kind of at this breaking point now where, do you look at the 2026 NFL draft and try to address the position there and then move off of Dexter Lawrence? Or do you get him the guaranteed money and you end up figuring it out and he comes back to New York? Because to tell you the truth, I would love to see him back for the Giants. I think he's still a very good player. He is someone that in a league that really emphasizes the defensive tackle position, it's very hard to find those key guys to be able to play that position as well. I think Lawrence fits that. And I'm really interested to see what the Giants kind of end up doing here to navigate it. Because if you do end up moving off of him as well, it's kind of the same thing with KT, where we're talking about him potentially getting moved for a pick and stuff. And, that's another avenue that you could go if you're the Giants to get an additional pick is to trade him. And, I think that you could probably get decent value for him, considering that he's only 28 years old, and there is still some the guaranteed money and stuff it plays into it. But it's definitely going to be an interesting thing to see, especially heading up to the draft this upcoming at the end of the month.
Yeah, less than 3 weeks now, 2.5 weeks about 23rd of the first day starts. But yeah, to your point though, I do think they'll come to an agreement. I think this is just Lawrence's attempt at a power play. I do think there's a part of him who probably says, a change of scenery would be nice. But the Giants come to him and say, if John Harbaugh comes to Dexter Lawrence, John Harbaugh is well loved around the league in general, right? He comes to Dexter Lawrence and says, hey, listen, Dexter, we got some special building here in New York. I'm here now. We got Jackson Dart, quarterback. We got some really good young pieces, Alto Carter, Brian Burns, on both sides of the ball, really big neighbors. We want to have you here for at least the next couple of years. Let's get something done. Let's get a new deal, restructured deal done for you. Let's keep you here. I think that'll happen. Even if it does, though, Dylan, whether Lawrence is there or he's not, the Giants need a defensive tackle regardless, because you look at their DT rotation right now. They picked Darius Alexander last year. He's a decent backup. He's not a starter, right? And they need a run stop, which is why I look at this year's draft class. I love Lee Hunter at number 37. I think he'd be a great pick. Now, he's not very athletic, but he's a big guy who stuffs to run. I've done all along. This throughout the whole offseason, and even during the season, I like Peter Woods out of Clemson. And his stock has slipped to the point where he might be there at 37 for the Giants. I don't think he will, but he might. It's a possibility. Caleb Banks, because of that foot injury now, it's a little concerning. He has 2 foot surgeries out over the last 6 months, but he might slip. So there should be opportunities for the Giants to draft a defensive tackle in this year's class. Even in the middle rounds, maybe if he slips to the 4th round, I don't think he will, but like a Dominique Orange right? The Giants have a third round pick right now, so that's another potential candidate. I think they need a DT regardless. But if they trade Lawrence, then they really need a defensive tackle, obviously. And what I'll say about Lawrence is this too. I think the Giants will shop around. They'll look around and see because if I'm the Giants and I can find a first round pick, then I'd probably do it. I just don't think there's a team out there right now based on the year he just had that's going to trade a first round pick for Dexter Lawrence.
Yeah, I don't hate them shopping around for Dexter Lawrence either. You got to make sure that, if you do see something on the table that you like, you might as well take it, and especially with this draft class and stuff being, not the best of top end guys, but more just a lot of depth pieces. It's definitely it's a conversation to have. And I think in the most likely scenario, if, something doesn't end up happening with, everything going on between Dexter Lawrence and the organization and stuff, I could definitely see the Giants taking one of those guys that you mentioned at pick 37. And I think that there's a good chance that some of those guys end up falling. And I mean, we've talked about him before too. Caleb Banks with the medical concerns, there's a real shot that he could be at 37, and I would instantly pull the trigger then if I were the Giants at that point and make the selection. It's just one of those cases where you at least have the right timing of being able to potentially move off of a guy like Dexter Lawrence with how well this draft class is at the defensive tackle position. But I do think that there's a part of me that thinks that having Dexter Lawrence in the mix, especially for year one of, whichever tackle you end up taking, would make it a lot easier, not just for him, but on Dexter Lawrence and the rest of the defensive line at that point too.
Yeah, because Dylan, when Lawrence is healthy, he's one of the most destructive defensive players in the NFL. 100%. Right? I don't think anybody would argue that. And again, I still think throughout the year, remember in 2024, the back half of the year, he dislocated his elbow in his last 5 games. It looked to me, and he was wearing an elbow brace during this past season, and the game against the Lions in overtime, he sat out overtime because of an elbow injury. So my thought here, and some other people have speculated the same thing, that injury never really fully healed, and that he was playing through it throughout the 2025 campaign. That would explain why he went from being a 3 straight Pro Bowl player to somebody who had a half the sack this past year. He was invisible for most of the year. I know his PFF grades are still pretty good, but I like PFF, don't get me wrong. But if you watch the games this year with Dexter Lawrence, you could see he was not making the same kind of impact that you're used to. And people say, he's getting double teamed. He always gets double teamed. He got double teamed the previous years as well. Didn't stop from getting 9 sacks in 12 games the year prior. So I think something was wrong there. I do think next year he'll bounce back. But if he doesn't, right, if the Giants feel like he may actually be declining, then trading him may be the best thing. And then you're going to have to look at other defensive tackles in this year's draft class, which you should be doing regardless, even if he does stay. But speaking of the draft, Dylan, we'll move on to the second part of this podcast here now. And it's the number 5 overall pick. Now, Dylan, you have some little intel you want to share as well. But we'll start out here talking about Jeremiah Love, because there's been a lot of chatter about Love potentially going to the Giants number 5 overall. And I read recently at ESPN, Matt Miller, about maybe a week or two ago, said that if Love does fall to 5, the Giants will take him. And, we've discussed this in the podcast before. Dylan, what do you think? Well, first of all, what do you think of Jeremiah Love at 5 for the Giants? And second of all, share the intel you had as well about the number 5 overall pick.
So this one's kind of tough because what I can gather from everything that's just going on with this year's draft class and stuff, I mentioned it before. This class doesn't have the top end talent as we've seen in previous classes. And I think that's going to be a big factor for a lot of these teams about how they handled the first round and how they navigate it as well. And to me, I think that if Jeremiah Love is there at 5, I would most likely – I think that it would probably be a case of the Giants taking him at that point. I think it was 2 weeks ago we did the last podcast, and everything, like I talked about it then too. everything that they've done this offseason has kind of shown you that they want to establish the run this year.
Mhm.
And I think that's going to be a big part of John Harbaugh's scheme coming into this. Just because that's been his style of play ever since he was coaching with the Ravens, and to me, I wouldn't mind it too much. I think that if you do that selection, you're just taking the best player available at that point. And I think that's what a lot of teams are kind of, having in their mind and stuff. But to me, my guess is how everything that pans out, I don't know if he's actually going to be there at 5. I think there's a real good chance that the Tennessee Titans go up and take him at 4. Because to me, if you look at that team, they just need something and they need a star. And, it sounds kind of cliche to just say that, but at the same time, too, their roster is one of the worst in the league. And if you could get a difference maker in there, like a Jeremiah Love, to really help out your future franchise quarterback in Cam Ward, I could see the vision with it. And it's the same exact blueprint I think that the Giants would be following there too. Now, the thing that I find most interesting is this. If Sonny Styles is there at 5, I think it's a guaranteed lock at this point that he will be taken by the Giants. Because again, you're following along about, the traits of whatever Harbaugh had with the Ravens and just the intel coming in and stuff. It's pointing to the fact that you're probably looking at a guy that you're just looking to have a defensive chess piece. And I think that's how a lot of the league, not just the Giants, view a guy like Sonny Styles, because again, he is an off-ball linebacker and it isn't ideal to be selecting one of the top 5. However, you want someone to be a star playmaker with your top 5 pick. And I think that's kind of the mindset that a lot of these teams are going to have if they're standing there at 5 or, in the top 5, is just get the best player available,
Yeah. One thing I'll add, Dylan, is right after we got the phone earlier, I just saw the Giants are going to be meeting with Mansour Delane.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, Dylan, now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this as well. If the Love and Styles stuff is partially a smokescreen on the part of the Giants, and what it could be is the Giants saying, hey, we have that on 5 overall pick. Love and Styles may be the 2 best players available at that spot. If you want one of them, trade up because we're going to take one of them. If you want Jeremiah Love, you better trade up or else we're taking him. If you want Sonny Styles, trade up or else we're taking him. Because the Giants have such a need at cornerback right now. And I also talked to you about this before, Dylan, about how earlier in the offseason and I think even late in the regular season, I kind of fought you on the idea of Jamal McCoy because I was concerned with the ACL. Missed all 2025. Then I saw his pro day. And I was like, whoa. Like, man, Dylan was on. He was on to something. I watched some tape on him. I was like, yeah, this kid is really good. This kid is really good. And I understand that the risk of taking a guy coming off a 20 ACL, missed his entire final season in college, the top 5 pick. But when you have such a need at corner, you lost Cordell Flott, you signed Greg Newsome, which is actually a downgrade. Paulson Adebo had a really not bad, but he had a disappointing first year at the Giants. Could be a bounce back candidate of 2026, but if he continues the trajectory he's on, it's going to be a really disappointing signing for the Giants. And they're not going to have anything at corner. They have no depth of position at all. And, I mean, you look around the league, that's a premium position. You need corners, especially, look what Seattle just did with that secondary. Look how good their secondary was this year. You need a premium. You need studs at the cornerback position to win this league. You do. I mean, the Chiefs had it with Trent McDuffie, and even Jalen Watson I wouldn't say he was a star, but he's a good player, right? So if I'm the Giants, I'm really looking at potentially taking a corner at 5 or trading down for him because and Mansour Delane too had a great pro day as well at LSU, and you were on both those guys throughout the year. I got to give credit for that. Both those guys, you were on them. I just feel like it could be. Maybe I'm just hoping it's a smoke screen so the Giants can take a cornerback. That's really what I really want that pick. But I don't know, Dan. What are your thoughts?
So I definitely think that it could be a smokescreen too. That's another thing because the way that I look at it as well is there are multiple teams that would most likely be willing to trade down, especially my Cleveland Browns from 6. They would more than willing to be able to move down if they got the opportunity. And I think that if the Giants were to do that as well, it would honestly open up the door for you to go out there and select a guy like a Mansour Lane and a Jermon McCoy. And I think that ultimately that would probably be the best case scenario for the Giants. And I think that in the back of the front office's heads, they kind of understand that too, because they know they need a top cornerback. They didn't go out and get one this offseason.
No.
And that's the biggest issue right now going into next year, in my opinion. You have so much potential on the offensive side of the ball. And there are parts to the defense where there is plenty of potential with Brian Burns and, also Abdul Carter and stuff. But at the same time, the secondary unit, it's just a disaster at this point. And I think that if you are kind of looking at where that could all line up, if you move back to, like 8 or 9 in that area, I think you'd be more than willing to be able to get someone like a Jermon McCoy or a Mansour Lane at that point. I would probably say that you should go ahead of a team like, Cincinnati or Miami or Dallas, just because those are the two. Honestly, those 3 are probably going to be in the hunt for a cornerback. All 3 of them desperately need one.
Dallas is at 10, I believe. They're at 10, right?
Dallas is at 12, and then 11 is Miami, and then 10 is Cincinnati.
Okay. Because I know there's no way Delane gets past Dallas at 12.
Not at all. And my guess is that, Delane, from what I've seen and heard, Delane is they love him in Dallas. So
I've also seen his stock is rising. His stock's rising. I also read before he could be a top 10 pick.
And you look at that pro day too. That was one of the biggest concerns for me was his tape was very good, but we don't necessarily know if athletically he'll be able to handle, the NFL kind of wide receivers and stuff. But he basically just told you, hey, I'm athletic enough when he ran a 4.35 or something like that.
4.35, something like that.
Something ridiculous. It's you're most likely going to be a top 10 pick. But again, I think that in the best case scenario, moving down to the 8 or 9 range and letting maybe the Chiefs or the New Orleans Saints could probably use one of those guys, either maybe even David Bailey if he falls. I think that could be in play as well, but I don't know. I'm a little interested to see, and I think also too another tidbit I'd say is if David Bailey starts to fall, watch for a trade. That's my other.
Do you think? I think it'll be one of David Bailey or Arvell Reese falls. I think. Then again, if Reese gets past the Jets, probably maybe Arizona takes him. Because Arizona's at 3, Texas at 4. But I could see a scenario, because we've seen this before in the draft zone, where you have 2 guys who are the top of their position. And one of them goes higher than expected, the other one just slips. I could see it happen with either of those 2. And we're hearing it now with also, and I guess we can go to the next topic here, because we're kind of bouncing back and forth. You mentioned Ruben Bain is slipping now.
Yeah.
And that's because remember, going into the year, he was using the number 1 overall pick potentially. So one of those guys, and it might not, maybe Reese is the guy who sticks at number 2 with the Jets. One of those guys is going to fall, and I'm very interested to see what happens if a team says, "Hey, you know what? David Bailey had 14.5 sacks last year. He's fallen. Let's trade up for him." Or Ruben Bain is maybe the most talented player in this draft class. So let's trade up. And at that point, then the doors open up for you for the Giants or even other teams in that top 10 to move down. And for the Giants too, Dylan, not only would you trade down and be able to pick up a Mansour Delane or a Jermon McCoy, you'd pick up another draft pick in the process. So there is so much incentive for the Giants to trade down here. They need those extra picks. And I just saw too that John Harbaugh came in and said when he first took the job, one of his first thoughts was, "This is a bad team. Why do we have such few draft picks?" Now, I will say the Giants defense, they did trade someone for their 2 best top players in Jackson Dart and Brian Burns, which I get it. But, you need more draft capital at the same time. Look at the Eagles. The Eagles were a Super Bowl winning team 2 seasons ago, and they are loaded with draft capital. The Chiefs have 2 first round picks this year. So there's so much incentive to trade down to the Giants and around the league as well. I'm curious to think, out of those top 10 guys generally, do you think David Bailey is the one most likely to fall out of those top 10 guys?
Honestly, probably not. I think, okay, here's where I think the top 5 will pan out.
Okay.
I think 1, Mendoza.
Yeah.
I know that's a lock. 2 is where the real draft starts.
Yeah.
I think right now I would say it's probably Arvell Reese. That's my best guess. Just because that pro day was insane for him as well, and I think that there is a much higher ceiling compared to like a guy like David Bailey. But another team that you definitely need to keep an eye on is the Arizona Cardinals. I think that the Arizona Cardinals could definitely move out of that pick, and they would be more than willing to if a team wants to come out to take a guy like David Bailey. And I think that David Bailey could most likely end up being the 3rd overall pick just because a team goes up and trades for him. And if it goes there, I think then at 4, it would be Love. And then 5, most likely at that case, if there's any other team that doesn't want to trade up, it would probably be Sonny Styles.
So is Carnell Tate the guy that's going to slip?
Tate, I think, would probably, because I did see Matt Miller. He came out today and said that he thinks he will probably be a top 10 pick. If I look at kind of where everything goes, I don't think Cleveland at 6 would take Tate. I don't think Washington at 7 would either. You can maybe make a case for New Orleans at 8 if they don't go up and try to trade for like a David Bailey.
Yeah.
I don't think Kansas City would either. I think they would also be more in the David Bailey hunt. So, yeah, I mean, and then you got 10 Cincinnati. I could definitely see Carnell Tate falling a little bit.
I'm going to be honest. Kansas City's really interesting to me for Carnell Tate. That's really interesting because, I mean, you look at the receiving course right now. You got Rashee Rice. They lost Marquise Brown. What else? Who am I missing? I mean, Xavier Worthy's there. I don't know, man. I don't know, Dylan. I could see Tate going and being that extra receiver there for them. I don't know.
But
that was scary.
To me, okay, so this is where I kind of stand with the Chiefs. Their offense is very reliant on the yards after the catch kind of thing. And you look at a guy like Rashee Rice, and that's, his bread and butter.
Yeah.
And I also, think back to the days where they had Tyreek Hill. It wasn't like they were just using Tyreek Hill as an absolute burner downfield.
No.
It was short yardage situations, and then they used his speed to go downfield. And I think that's what they were trying to originally do with Xavier Worthy. But to me, I don't think Carnell Tate really offers you that. And it's, he runs the 4.54 at the combine.
Yeah.
The speed isn't there with him, but like his other traits that he has makes him, definitely a top 10 pick in my eyes and stuff.
Yeah.
But to me, for the Chiefs, I don't see him making sense there. I think that more realistically, they would be in the running for a team like a guy, Omar Cooper Jr., who I think is
at 9.
Not at 9.
Oh, okay.
Because they still have both. They have
first rounders. Yeah.
Yeah. And on top of that, too, they also, I think they would probably be prioritizing edge at that point. Because if you think about it, Chris Jones is getting up there in age. And they have Karlaftis, who, I mean, I liked him coming out of college, but it's not like he's absolutely lighting up the world.
No, he's a good player. That's about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then on top of that, too, you also have to think that they could also be in the running for one of these top cornerbacks as well, especially at 9.
Actually, yeah.
Because, I mean, you lost – I mean, if you lost both of them, yeah. And to be honest with you, I could also see them saying, like, you know what, Avian Terrell is very similar of the style of play that we had out of a guy, that we previous had. why not go after him? And that would obviously not at 9 or anything,
Mhm.
but I could see that being a need. I think that they're probably going to be targeting more of the defensive side of the ball just because of how much they lost at
Yeah.
this point, at least at pick 9.
It's funny you mentioned Terrell too, because I've seen now. I mean, a few weeks ago he was viewed as a mid to late first round pick. I've seen him now most mock drafts having run in the early second round, and that's another option for the Giants at 37.
Yeah.
If he slips, and the Giants will take a corner round 1, they may be looking at Terrell maybe. And I know he's got size issues, but like I think he'll be fine playing on the outside. I think he's very tenacious. A lot again, like you said, like McDuffie. Very, very similar because McDuffie, remember, coming out of Washington, he had very similar issues, right? The size issues. People were, he was fine. So I could see Terrell being the same thing. And Dylan, I'm going to throw another player at you here that I think could somehow work his way into the top 10. Kenyon Sadiq.
Yeah, I could.
And the reason why, and now not that saying it'll definitely happen because he's a tight end, it's a non-premium position. But did you see his combine?
Mm-hmm.
That was, I think he ran a 4.3, 740 or something like that. That was incredible. Mm-hmm. And I can even see, there's who does New Orleans have a tight end right now?
What was that?
Who does New Orleans have a tight end right now? I'm curious. Who the tight end is? It used to be Juwan Johnson.
Juwan Johnson, yeah.
It's Juwan Johnson? It is. Okay, yeah. And they have Noah Fant too. Okay.
Oh, they signed Noah Fant.
Yeah, I mean Johnson had a really good year last year, so maybe not, but I don't know. He's a guy I could see because one team I really have my eye on here, Dylan, is the Jets, and the reason why is because they have the number 2 overall pick. They also have 16. The Jets need so much. I could see them trading back in the first round for number 2. And picking up more draft capital. And I know they drafted Mason Taylor last year, but I'm not sure Mason Taylor is the guy they view as a long-term number 1 tight end. I could see him, maybe they might just want to take Sadiq at 16 if he's there. I'm not sure he's going to be there. I know at most mocks have him going to Carolina at 19. I'm sure you've seen that. I'm not sure Sadiq, as much of a freak athlete as he is going to be there 19. I could see the Jets moving back and taking him somewhere in that 5 to 10 range. I could see it happening. Maybe not 5, because the Jets also they really need an edge rusher. But if they are able to get another first round pick or pick up extra draft capital, the Jets I think are a team to watch for something really weird happen here in the first round.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I mean, after trading away Sauce Gardner and Quentin Williams, I mean, your whole entire defense has been blown up, and you have no optimism on offense at this point. I mean, you traded for Geno Smith, which congratulations. I don't think that's gonna be a huge difference maker in the long run. But I mean, I wouldn't put it past him as well, because here's the other thing too. I mean, Kenyon Sadiq, I could. If someone said to me right now, and they go back, they see the draft and they come back into the past and they tell me what happens, and they say that he goes 10 or in the top 10, I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be like, all right, well, I mean, I'm assuming that some team probably just traded up for him and was banking on, his potential as an athletic tight end that could, find soft spots in coverage, kind of like a Travis Kelce thing. But at the same time, if the same person came back and said he didn't get picked until late round 1, I could also see that, that's the current climate. And I think especially just with how rare the tight end position is to be selected in round 1, you really don't know who would be willing to go out there and make the move. I think Carolina probably makes a lot of sense for him, just because they're at a spot right now where they have like a lot of good difference makers, and they ended up getting Jalen Phillips in this offseason for their pass rush. So like they could really do anything at this point, and it wouldn't surprise me. But I also think though that there are plenty of teams, I don't think it's crazy to say that, maybe Kansas City could go out from potentially take him. Because I mean, you look at Travis Kelce right now. I think he's on his last year of his deal because he restructured it or
He's basically going year to year. I think.
Yeah, he's going year to year at this point. I thought he was going to probably retire after this year because just getting older and he's had an amazing career and stuff. But I could see them saying like, "Hey, we want to find a replacement pretty quickly. Why not just go out and take Kenyon Sadiq?"
I've seen him mocked to the Chiefs with their second first-round pick. I've seen that, but I don't know, Dylan. I just get the feeling that because every single draft there's a surprise somewhere, right? Someone reaches for someone. He is such an athletic freak, and it wouldn't shock me if 5 years from now, as you look back, and he ends up being the best player or one of the top players from this year's draft class. He's that athletic. He's that much kind of like Arvell Reese at edge, linebacker, whatever you want to say. I think Sadiq is similarly a freak at tight end. I think he ran the fastest 40 time in history for a tight end. I think he beat Vernon Davis.
Yeah,
for that mark. I know teams don't usually like to take tight ends high up. I mean, Pitts was taken 4th overall by Atlanta. That didn't really work out that well for them. He had one really good year there. His first year hasn't been great since. Brock Bowers was taken, I think, 13th by the Raiders 2 years ago.
13 or 14, yes.
Right? Like and you could argue he was, the best player from that, or one of the best players from that class. He's great.
Yeah.
Would Sadiq go higher? I don't know. But again, with this year's – see, last year, Dylan, you kind of knew that we knew Cam Ward was going 1 to Tennessee, right? And we also kind of, the closer we got to the draft, we knew Shedeur was slipping and ended up going around 5, obviously. But we knew that 2 and 3 were probably, 2, 3, and 4 would be some combination of Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and Will Campbell. We kind of knew that. Now you heard some talk about Jalen Walker was rumored to be maybe in that mix, but I don't think it was ever actually a thing. This year, you don't know. Like, is Arvell Reese a lock at 2 for the Jets? I don't know. I don't know if he is. We were hearing, not long ago that Ruben Bain could have been picked for the Jets. It looks like that's not going to happen now. It's a really weird draft.
Yeah. No, and I completely agree. I think that, I say that Sonny Styles, if he's there at 5, that'll be a lock for the Giants. Ultimately speaking, we don't know what's going to happen at this point because this year, like you said, it's truly a unique year because we only have one quarterback that's really kind of solidified himself as a true first round guy. And the other ones, I mean, you can make a case for maybe Ty Simpson going round 1. I don't necessarily think that he will be a round 1 pick this year.
Yeah.
I think that it's just, it all depends on, who ends up trying to go
it's either the Jets or the Browns. And someone's going to take a chance on one of those 2 teams.
Or even the Cardinals, I could see, honestly, come out.
At 3?
No, at going down, they would have to trade back up because they have 33 at least, so then they could potentially move up in the back end. It would honestly be similar to how the Giants moved up for Jackson Dart.
Okay,
that would probably be my best bet. But I mean, this class overall, like I said, it's a lot of depth, and I think teams are going to want to focus on targeting the later picks. And I wouldn't be surprised then if the Giants got an opportunity to trade down that they would be more than willing to take that because they don't have a 3rd round pick. They don't have an ample amount of draft capital this year, which could affect them in this new regime.
Of course. And speaking of depth, Dylan, one I'm going to throw at you who I think might be the best quarterback in this year's draft class. And you might actually be inclined to agree. The guy I'm looking at is Drew Aller. Drew Aller, remember, going into 2025, a lot of people viewed him as number 1 overall pick. Right? And that was when Arch Manning was, still on the fence about coming out or not. And obviously he didn't. Drew Aller, 6'5", 230. You see Josh Allen, right? Great arm, very athletic. Had the broken ankle this year, missed the last half of the year. And, he wasn't great before the ankle injury either, those first 6 games, whatever it was. But I think from a talent perspective, Dylan, his talent is off the charts. His arm talent, his athleticism. I know his processing speed isn't really the best, but we had the same question about the Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming. right? So I really feel like Aller could be, and it might say more about this year's draft class at quarterback than it does about Drew Aller, right? Like I'm not entirely sold on Mendoza. I like Mendoza. I'm not entirely sold on him. I don't like Ty Simpson at all. I'm not a fan of Ty Simpson. Kay Klubnik had a really, really bad year this year. I think he's a little small. And again, he doesn't really have any traits that really stand out to me. Whereas Aller has that rocket arm, right? And he's very athletic. He's a guy I think that if he gets picked in the third round, maybe in the second round by the Jets, I can see taking him. Maybe even the Browns taking him at some point, and those in day two, I can see him becoming the best quarterback in this year's draft class.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely going to be a case of where he lands. He has the traits to be the best quarterback from this draft class, no doubt whatsoever. I mean, the arm strength. So he's actually from a city 30 minutes away from me in Medina. So I've known him for the longest time. I've watched him play from high school. I know the Drew Aller experience, and I think that the main concern and I guess the drawback that I have and that could really affect him is the fact that, he showed some signs of progression from year to year, but was it enough to warrant him being like, okay, like this is giving
stalled.
Time to develop.
He definitely stalled.
And I think that the injury that he sustained during his last year, it's going to be a huge impact on not just his draft and where he ends up and stuff, but I also think that, his development too, because that's a good portion of time that you missed of quality reps against pretty good competition too, because he didn't get to play against OSU. I'm pretty sure it was Ethan Grunkemeyer that played as well.
It was Grunkemeyer.
He missed plenty of those games where it's like, all right, those matter in the long run. And I know NFL scouts look at those as like, can he compete against the best of the best? And to me, I'm not sold on him being the best guy just yet, but to say that he does have the best potential for sure. Like there's no doubt in my mind that if he gets into the right coaching scheme and the right coordinator and stuff and everything is perfect, like that would be the best case for him. And that would be, the best path for him to potentially be the best quarterback. And
like if the Rams take him at some point.
Exactly. That's the one team I think that would really help out, because Matthew Stafford kind of has that gunslinger trait to him where it's like, hey, I'm not afraid to just rip any type of ball. And I think Allard has some of that. I don't necessarily think that he's a true, like, okay, you know what? I see it. I'm going to rip it. There's a lot of hesitation with his game. But I do think that he at least has a lot of the same qualities as a Matthew Stafford in terms of arm strength, arm talent, and being able to, just the size as well too. And on top of that, he has the ability to move as well, which is pretty rare to see from a quarterback at 6'5". So
that's why. Do you see the Josh Allen comparisons, or is that just because of the size and athleticism? You don't see it like I do?
I don't see it just because I don't necessarily – the way that I view it is more of like, what can he be at the NFL level? That's kind of my holdback on where, the comps for Josh Allen come in. I don't necessarily see him potentially developing into that point. Is there a chance that he could? Sure. There's a chance that I could also have made a perfect bracket in this year's, the NCAA tournament. But – it just doesn't, it's hard. And especially at the quarterback position too, to actually be able to pan out and develop. You see first round quarterbacks all the time, not even be successful with their first team that they're in. And there's busts all the time. So I think that the quarterback position it's tough to evaluate on top of that. And I wouldn't be surprised, though, if you did, 5 years down the road, we see Drew Howard starting quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams, taking them to the Super Bowl and stuff. Like, okay, like, guess he hit that max potential kind of thing. But at the same time, too, I'm not, sold on him potentially being there.
Because I do know the one knock against Aller, too, and we've seen this. I remember last year, not this year, but last year against Ohio State, he did not play well. And he has a history of not playing well against the best teams. and in bigger games. He does have that history. So I wonder, is there like a mental block for him in those games, or is it just because his skill level is exposed against the better defenses? That's
And, and it also could be a case of like, scheme wise and the pieces around him and stuff, because that's obviously one of the biggest things that impacts quarterbacks at the NFL level. And I think the same thing could be said about quarterbacks at college. They need people around them. And you look at Fernando Mendoza, I mean, he was playing alongside of Omar Cooper Jr., Elijah Surratt, who are going to be drafted. And then he had a steady run game on top of that as well. Yeah. And those, I mean, the two running backs are probably going to be drafted at this point.
Yeah.
But you look at kind of Drew Allar's situation. I mean, who was he even throwing to most of the time? They try to go out and get these guys in the portal, and none of them ended up panning out to be what they were expected to be. So it's a hard kind of evaluation when you're looking at it at the end of the day. But to me, I mean, I'll say this, though. I know I was kind of knocking him and stuff. If he's there in like the third, fourth round, like I am totally fine with a team taking a flyer on him. Like there's no doubt about it, because the potential is there. And I again, if he has the right things all around him, who knows?
Yeah, no, I agree. And you mentioned Penn State. That's why going into this past year, I didn't understand the hype around Penn State. Yeah, they had the two running backs, Kaytron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. Singleton probably should have came out for the draft last year, based on the year he just had. But other than that, they really didn't have much in terms of their. Honestly, do they even have any receivers in the draft? I don't think they do. They're going to draft anyway. It's not they first couple days.
Is Jabora Pena coming out this year?
I don't know.
That's the only one I can think of.
Yeah, there's no tight end. There's no Tyler Warren.
No, right? That's the other thing too. His top playmaker last year was Tyler Warren, and I mean, if you looked at his film from those past seasons and stuff, I mean, they favored him a ton. And and kind of now that you don't have that element to your offense, that takes a huge hit for a quarterback in that situation. And looking at it now, Jabora Pena it looks like he is coming out. I mean, he is 24, so that does make sense. And then they also have Devontae Ross, who I have not heard a single thing about, and he's ranked, I think, 370.
Didn't they get him in the portal?
What was that?
Didn't they get him in the portal 2 years ago?
He might have been.
Yeah.
Not
I don't know. Yeah. They're and the thing is, too, there's a lot of good receivers, and we'll get to one in a second here. There's a lot of good receivers in this year's draft class. So the fact that, if you're like on the borderline, you're probably not getting picked.
No.
Right? Because, I mean, we saw last year with the running back position, it was so deep. I mean, we saw Raheem Sanders going drafted.
Yeah.
And so I think this year, with the wide receiver position being very deep once again, you're going to see some guys go that surprise you who go undrafted. Because we're seeing stocks rise. Like I know out of Oregon, Malik Benson's stock is rising now. At Oregon, and that was kind of a surprise. There were some people who felt he might not even get drafted. Now I'm seeing him, mocked in the fourth round in some mock drafts. It's going to be interesting, Dylan. And one guy that we'll move on to now, who I love for the Giants, is Cincinnati wide receiver Jeff Caldwell. And to me, Dylan, this is one of those guys that when you're drafting them on day 3, rounds 5, 6, and 7, especially. Even round 4 to an extent, but those last 3 rounds, you're taking dart throws, right? Like at that point, you're just looking, unless you have even if you have a dire need, chances are you're not getting a starter at one of those positions for year 1. You're looking at the guys who are the most talented. That's to me when you take BPA, right? And you're the Giants. Let's say you don't take a Carnell Tate, you don't take, I don't know, a Denzel Boston round 2 if he's there at 37. You don't take receiver the first couple rounds. You circle back around to day 3, and Jeff Caldwell's on the board, 6'5", 215, ran a 4.30 40-yard dash, which was, I think, one of only 3 receivers in history who were 6'3" and over to have a 4.3 40 plus, a certain broad jump. I have a very hard time not pulling the trigger on him. I mean, I know he wasn't overly productive in Cincinnati last year, but he played at Lindenwood before had a 1,000-yard season his last year at Lindenwood before transferring to Cincinnati, averaging like 18 yards per catch for his collegiate career. Excuse me. I love the idea of taking Jeff Caldwell. Would fit that X receiver mold the Giants so badly need.
Yeah, and my biggest thing too when it comes to the later rounds of an NFL draft, you have to have kind of a certain mentality or I guess process when it comes to those picks, because if you're just throwing like, random shots up like it's just most of them is not going to work out.
Yeah.
And I think that the best case scenario in most of those spots is taking someone that's probably, an athletic freak at that point, because
like Caldwell.
Yeah, you can't teach athleticism.
No.
You can teach, route running and all this stuff, but you can't teach 6'5" running extremely fast. That's something that is rare. And I think the one thing that I do like about Jeff Caldwell, especially heading into this year's class, is Cincinnati's had a pretty good track record with wide receivers in the draft. I mean, obviously you have a guy like Alec Pierce, who really, he's kind of an outlier, I'd say, because we didn't expect him to be, a proven wide receiver one. I didn't. I thought
I still think he is, to be honest. I think he's a 2.
Even then, he's a little bit of an anomaly. But in terms of just guys that stick around in the league, I also think of another one, Trey Tucker. He's been in the league for a while. I know Tyler Scott has made his rounds here and there and stuff, but Cincinnati has been known for that. And if you're taking a guy, 6'5", 215, that's a prototypical X receiver mold. And I think that the fact that he has his speed with him, he has all these traits, and it's just trying to put it together at that point.
Very raw.
Perfect flyer, in my opinion. And I think it's going to, if we're talking about draft positioning and where he could potentially end up, it will really depend on where all the other wide receivers go, because I think you hit it right on the head too. This wide receiver class is actually really good, because when I look at it, you got guys like Kevin Coleman Jr., who I'm a pretty big fan of.
Yeah.
I've seen him be, 5th to 7th round, even undrafted in some points. So it's such a discrepancy, and, maybe he falls to round 4. I wouldn't mind the Giants going out there and saying hey, let's take a shot on this, because again, in those later rounds, day 3, you most likely aren't going to be hitting on those picks.
Yeah.
So at least try something where, if they have a high RAS score, take it. And I think that's going to be the case with Jeff Caldwell. I think that there will be some team that is really interested in him and could potentially take him early, because DK last year with the Titans, I didn't expect him to go that early, and no one really did. But again, it's the traits. He ends up panning out for him, and that could be the same thing for Jeff Caldwell.
Yeah, and in most mocks, Dylan, I'm seeing him rounds 5 through 7 in most mocks. I really get the feeling, as you just said, I think he's going to go earlier. I could see a team now. Again, I'm not saying for sure it'll happen. I can see a team taking him round 3. And remember, last year Dante Thornton out of Tennessee was looked at as a 7th round pick. The Raiders took him round 4. Now it's the Raiders, but they took him round 4, right? Because he's 6'5" and is really fast. I think he averaged 25 yards per catch at Tennessee last year. Now, again, Dylan, you and I have been over this Tennessee receivers. We've been over it, same with Chris Brazell. But the point is that because he's tall and fast, the Raiders took him 3 rounds earlier than most people expected. There were people saying he might go undrafted last year. I don't know if you remember this. Last year, Dante Thornton, when he went to Tennessee. So I could see there being a similar thing with Caldwell. And I'll be honest with you, Dylan, I could see the Cleveland Browns taking a shot at him on one of those early rounds. The Jets need a receiver alongside Garrett Wilson, because Garrett Wilson, as good as he is, he's not an X receiver. True X receivers are so hard to come by, right? And I think now, based on the mold, is DK Metcalf, right? So you look at Jeff Caldwell and you see DK Metcalf. You see he's even taller, not quite as bulky as Metcalf was, but he has similar speed, very similar traits when Metcalf was at Ole Miss. Now Metcalf did see better competition in the SEC. There's no question about it. But it's not like Caldwell's playing in a horrible conference. He's in the Big 12. He's not. It's not like he's in some mid-major conference. So I don't know. I think if you're the Giants and he's there in round 4, and let's say you even if you didn't get a third round pick, right? Let's say you don't trade for one. You take Sonny Styles round 1. You circle back around round 2. You take, I don't know, Avian Terrell or a defensive tackle round 2. You still need a receiver. You sign Darnell Mooney and Calvin Austin, who are both a bit redundant in my opinion. Now, Mooney can't play outside. He's not just a slot guy. Austin is basically a slot guy. Malik Neighbors comes back and say he's healthy next year. He's only 6 foot. He's not that tall. You need that big red zone target for Dart. And you could argue with Isaiah Likely, but usually you want a receiver. You want an X receiver to really put yourself on the top. And I really think that Caldwell could be the guy for the Giants. It would be perfect for the Giants in round 4 or even better, round 5.
And I'll even say this. I don't even think that this is a hot take, but in terms of value, I'd rather have Caldwell over like a Chris Brazell. Because I don't want I mean, if he's actually going to be taken in round 2, no shot I'm going to actually deal with that, because I view them kind of in the same relative realm,
I think Caldwell's ceiling is higher, my opinion. I think his ceiling is
exactly higher. And I think that Caldwell's ceiling is a little bit higher too, just because he is a little bit faster. He's a little bit more physical at the catch point.
Yes.
I think that there are plenty of traits that you could bank on at that point. And to me, like, it would just be a way better value pick if you went after Caldwell instead of a guy like Chris Brazell, because I mean, again, I've knocked on the Tennessee wide receivers a ton in their route trees and stuff, but at some point we have to realize that, like, one, the Giants have already tried this experiment with the Tennessee wide receiver, and on top of that too, like, it's just that doesn't, if you're banking on a guy to potentially break out and stuff, it's not going to be someone that is going to be a second rounder. You're banking on a second rounder to be like an instant impact player.
Yes. Which is why I'm liking Peter Woods or Avian Terrell round 2, or Caleb Banks someone in round 2.
Exactly. And I think it's just a way better process than if you're going to go after a guy like Caldwell at that point.
Because right now there's 3 Tennessee receivers I can think of at the NFL level. Cedric Tillman, Dante Thornton, who are very similar, the traits, and then Jalen Hyatt. It was a little different, a little smaller, but Jalen Hyatt, you look at his numbers in college, he was explosive at Tennessee. Comes to the Giants, he's not even playing, right? Cedric Tillman, to be fair to Tillman, he had some injuries, but Dylan, you're the Browns guy. Correct me if I'm wrong. This picture, even when he was healthy, he didn't really make an impact. So
he would have made an impact if considering that we don't have any wide receivers, you would have known if he made an impact, I feel like.
yeah, exactly. And in Vegas, Dante Thornton was a similar situation. They trade Jacoby Myers. You think, Dante Thornton's going to explode now. Does nothing.
Nope.
Right? So, I don't know. I think if you're the Giants, I think avoiding Brazell is probably the best thing. I've seen him mock to the Giants a couple of times. I'm like, I don't see the Giants taking Brazell. I don't think they're going to go back to that tree, back to that root, that well-looking, I should say, tree. I think in the root trees. It's not good if you're a Tennessee receiver. So to me, Caldwell will be a fantastic pick. Dylan, are there any other really? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but you're the draft expert, so you should know this stuff. Are there any other late round dart throws for the Giants? Doesn't have to be a wide receiver. Any position that you look at, you like. A guy where you say, okay, this guy's a freak athlete. And it could even be a position with the Giants. It could even be an edge rusher. Any guy late in the draft.
One name. I think, honestly, the one that I was looking at and I've been seeing a lot of recently, I don't know how much Tennessee or Texas A&M tape you've been watching, but Trey Zuron, the third, he's an offensive tackle. Well, he was an offensive tackle at Texas A&M, but he's most likely going to kick inside, maybe even the center position in the NFL. Mm-hmm. He's someone where, obviously, he, playing offensive tackle for most of his college career. Not many people really view him as an offensive tackle in the NFL.
6'7".
But he's six. He's 6'7", at 312.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of like hype around him in terms of where he could potentially land in the draft. I think that there's plenty of teams that could take a shot on him in round 4 around there. But I think in terms of we've discussed the interior offensive line for a while now with the Giants and how that is a need. I think that would be a great flyer for them too, because you also have that kind of, at least, the history of being an offensive tackle, I think will help him in the long run as well. To be able to I think it's a lot nicer to have an offensive tackle move inside
and vice versa.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the best case scenario for a guy like him. But I mean, that would be one name that I would look at, especially in like rounds 4 or 5. Another one that kind of in the similar boat. He didn't play offensive tackle in college, but Kentucky's Jalen Farmer. He's also one where a late, 4-5 range, I could see him going. Very, very aggressive in like the run game and stuff. Probably needs some help in like pass pro a little bit there. But again, a nice little shot to take there because he has some traits that you could really build off of.
There's one more guy though. He's not a day 3 pick, and I'm not even sure he'll go to the Giants. But I've been watching his tape. I've been reading about him, looking at his numbers, and I've been watching his tape even more extensively recently because I'm so excited about this one player in this draft. Gabe Akis out of Illinois, edge rusher. Have you paid attention to Gabe Akis at all?
Out of Illinois, I've done a little bit, yeah.
I'm going to tell you something. Now, again, the Giants don't need an edge rusher. Okay, we don't need an edge rusher, but I see a guy like a Gabe Akis, and the explosiveness that he has at the position. And I saw like a month or two ago, he was mocked to Chicago late 1st round, but now I'm seeing him like 3rd round, somewhere in that range. He's a guy that if you do want BPA in the 3rd, late day 2, he's the guy to look at. I've already done. I would go watch his tape. I think you'd be very impressed by Gabe Akis. To me, one of the best edge rushers in this class, in my opinion. I think he's that good.
Yeah, and I mean, I've watched a little bit. I haven't gotten into the full extent of his film just yet. But I mean, if you just look off of his stats, and I know we don't like to be the box stats,
but it matters.
It matters to an extent. And I mean, he's coming off of an 11 sack year. He had 13 and a half tackles for loss, 43 combined tackles, 3 forced fumbles. Like, he's very productive at the college level. And I think
in the Big Ten too.
Yes, at the Big Ten level, where a lot of good offensive linemen in the Big Ten. Very, very stiff competition that he has been up against too. And one name that I have seen him kind of comped to, and we just mentioned him earlier in the podcast, George Karlaftis. That's kind of that similar Big Ten, strong, powerful pass rusher. Like, that's the mold that he fits. And I think that he's definitely, I mean, I've seen him mocked in late round 1, 2 originally, but he, like round 2, I think is probably going to be his sweet spot. But we talked about the wide receiver class, this edge class as well. I mean, it has a ton of depth, because I think that there is almost 10 guys that could be taken within the first 2 rounds. For the edge position.
Even in rounds 3 and 4, there are guys there who you look at, they might get. There's a lot of them. There's one guy at UCF.
Malachi Lawrence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's someone. Actually, I've seen him like potentially late round 1, 2.
Malachi Lawrence, really? Wow. Okay.
Like late. I don't think that'll actually happen. I think it's most realistically going to be like a round 2 guy. But like there's a ton of edges, and I mean, Western Kentucky, Nadim Tucker or Nadim Tucker. I don't know how to pronounce it. I apologize for that. But he's a stud as well. I've seen him go like 4th round, and I mean, heck, even as a Browns fan, I'm totally sold on him taking him 4th round, even though we
Yeah.
have, Myles Garrett and an awesome pass
I
rush.
think Alex right. I mean,
Yeah, there's so much depth with that position as well too. Like this class just has depth.
That's why it's and we're over an hour here now, so we'll close this. When me and Dylan talk about the draft, we can just go on and on.
Right.
But that's why it's so exciting. Like it's weird, Dylan. Most people get excited about the first round of the draft, and I get it. I get excited about those middle rounds because that to me is where you really, when you dig deep, you're gonna get those really exciting talents that people aren't really looking for, right? Like for example, the Browns taking Harold Fannin last year. Harold Fannin wasn't a name that anyone was really talking about. He was out of
falling on boards.
And which boggles my mind, he led the whole country in catches and receiving yards his last year at Bowling Green, which boggles my mind. Goes to Browns his first year, 70 catches, 700 yards. Stud. Right? Those are the kinds of guys that really will make or break your draft. Now, again, you need to hit your first round pick. But where you'll really make hay in the draft, really make your money with those mid-round picks where you can say, hey, you know what? I took Tyreek Hill in round 5, and look what happened, right? I think even Jalen Watson was a 7th-round pick for Kansas. I think he was 7th round for Kansas City, and look what happened. Ended up being a really good corner. Cordell Flott for the Giants was a round 3 pick. That was round 3, right? Yeah. And he's gone now, but he was really good for the Giants when he was there. Mm-hmm. So, guys, we're about 2 weeks out from the draft. It's 23rd is day 1 of the draft. We're April 7th right now recording this podcast, but 16 days out. It's going to be really exciting the next couple of weeks, deciding what's going to happen here. I mean, I, as a Giant fan, do not want Sonny Styles, but if it happens, it happens. I mean, I kind of resigned to that fact at this point. But I'm also really excited to see the Giants in those middle rounds as well. And I know Dylan over there sitting as a Browns fan over there is really excited as well, with the Browns having 85 picks in this year's draft to really get going over there.
No kidding.
Yeah, but until next time, everybody. This is the Giants Roundtable podcast. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. Me and Dylan just love talking draft. We'll probably be talking here, another 10, 15 minutes after the podcast is over here. So until next time, guys, I'm Anthony Schmidt. That's Dylan Feltovich. Have a good one, and we'll see you next time.